I'm Emily Strub, Music Theater BFA 2020 at Illinois Wesleyan. I served as the dramaturg and setup writer for Have a Heart, which was the title of the show we were putting together for Music Theater Scene Study class this past spring. And it involved the juniors and the seniors at Illinois Wesleyan looking into musicals from the 19-teens and the early 1920s to get a better understanding of that style of acting and singing. And it was also just a good way to look into musicals that are very hard to produce nowadays and often not produced because, as I found out, it's very hard to get a hold of the materials. My research process began back in December of 2019 when I was actually asked to be a part of this project for my senior signature work. But also, Scott Susong needed somebody to dig into and do all the research that he didn't really have the time for. And I was perfectly all right with that because it's right up my alley, but I soon discovered that it was quite difficult to get a hold of everything at one time. Lots of these scores are only available through the New York Public Library archives, and even discovering that took a long time, and I had to do it through a lot of actual image searching rather than keyword searches. And of course, Chris Woodley helped me with that immensely, and we started to find the songs, some of the librettos, and those we couldn't get a hold of, some were actually performed by a light opera society in Ohio, and I would have to watch a DVD and transcribe the scene. My job during this whole thing was supposed to be that of dramaturg and looking up historical facts to explain what was going on in these shows and at the time so that we could put it into context and have a deeper understanding of the shows. I don't think I got to do as much as I would have liked. When I finally had gathered all the materials and we were starting to give them to our classmates and working through them, I thought I would then have more time to go back in and really understand the background of what was going on. But thanks to the pandemic, that was cut very short. So I did not really get to formulate any sort of thesis, not that I necessarily had to for the class, but it would have been nice to have something to really unify the work, and then I would feel better about presenting it as an educational whole to other people, which was the plan, was to film this whole presentation and pass it along so that other people could learn about the princess musicals and early musicals of the 1920s. But what I did do before the pandemic is I wrote all the setups for the first act, which is the Princess Theater musicals. And these were basically, they were historical explanations of what was going on in the scenes, but they're also mainly to tell us what's happening in the songs and the scenes being performed. So I had to read the librettos to understand the plots, which are quite wacky by today's standards, but I grew to love it, and at least we have the first act done. I'm going to read you the first and last setups that I wrote, and then I'm going to show you the rest. Have a Heart. Setup. The year is 1917. Here in Schoonmaker's department store, working women mingle with the upper crust of society as they shop for lingerie. Lizzie O'Brien, a shop girl who is secretly working as a detective to catch a counterfeiter, resists the advances of her beau, Ted Sheldon. Like many of the young women who entered the workforce at that time, she is enjoying her independence and the freedom to discern which man she will love, as well as which job she will take. Her employer, Mr. Schoonmaker, pays lip service to the new trend of socialism, believing that the breaks and treats he provides his female employees will demonstrate his generosity and placate them. However, he is unable to placate his wife, Peggy, who recently divorced him over accusations of his cheating with the famous actress Dolly Brabazon. Whether working or wooing, everyone is certainly busy. Leave It to Jane. Today, perhaps the most famous Kern, Bolton, and Woodhouse's Princess Theater collaborations, based on yet another play, is the still performed Leave It to Jane. With the turn of the century came a burst in enrollment. America's colleges and universities were expanding and more accessible to men and women alike. Catering to the newly aspirational middle class, the show paints an amiable picture of small-town life while remaining a satire of Midwestern college experience, including school rivalry, hidden identities, and an ambitious woman at the center of it all. Jane Witherspoon, the famously flirtatious and alluring daughter of the president of Atwater College, aims to keep the star halfback Billy Bolton on the football team to defeat the rival Bingham College. Though she is the college's renowned charmer, as a fashionable young woman, Jane aspires to be as seductive as the famous movie star vamps, like Theda Bara, who modeled herself after famous and sexually powerful women like Cleopatra. Jane's embodiment of a freer sexuality is not placed in contrast with Bessie and Stubbs' more traditional approach to romance, but examined in parallel, showing that the sun can shine on both romances when they pursue their other half. As Jane is conjuring her plan to entice Billy Bolton to not only stay on at Atwater College, but to even change his name to hide his presence from his father, her two friends and admirers, Bessie Tanner and Stub Talmadge, sing about Jane's famous problem-solving abilities. Need to save a football team, win a bet, or confess to the love of your life? Leave it to Jane. Here are the setups as I wrote them. These would have been read in between the scenes and songs to give the audience the context. And it was a lot of fun to put them together, even though I feel that it was not necessarily part of the entertainment of the show. I was just trying to make it all make sense together, since it's basically like a review that we were doing. I really did come to enjoy what we were putting together, and I was really hoping that everybody else would enjoy seeing all the work my classmates had done. I actually really loved the humor of these shows and seeing my fellow seniors and the juniors acting them out. And I hope that maybe what we put together can be of use at some point in the future if Scott wants to continue this process. I think it would be still really useful educationally, but it's also just a lot of fun. And the last thing I want to do is I really want to thank Chris Woodley for his attitude and his help, and also Scott for giving me this project in the first place.